twisted pearls. And this building's distinctive shape recalls that history. That curve, inspired by dhows, the traditional sailing boats had applied these waters since ancient times.
Making an iconic building look like a ship was only part of the challenge. The architects wanted something more. They did a statement.
Solution? Well, put your building 300 metres out to sea on its own, tailor-made private island. Because it's not going to be cheap or easy.
Engineers had to make an island big and solid enough to hold a 250,000-ton tower. Most of all, they had to protect it from the sea and the power of the waves. Even this placid-looking gulf can have a dangerous temper, easily wash away a man-made island. Back in the UK, I'm going to attempt even a relatively small amount of water can do a surprising amount of damage. I'm going to create an artificial wave. The man in charge of sea defences at the Burj Al Arab was Mike McNichols.
And these things are pretty powerful.
Yeah, you know, in the right circumstances, at the right speed, they can just act like a solid.
Yeah.
Smashing into whatever's there.
This plate glass will test the destructive power of our wave. And don't think that this glass is a paper. It's 10 mil thick. It's the safety stuff they use in tall buildings to stop people falling out. It's as thick as normal window glass. This is our wave. It's a ton of water. But it needs one more thing to be like a true wave.
You need some, you know, bit of speed to get this thing going, just like a wave, pushing through the air.
Our wave will be set in motion by gravity explosives.
What I've done, you'll like this, it's very subtle, is at the bottom of the bag is sort of a loop of cord, explosive, which will explode immediately. And at that point, there'll be no bottom on the bag, so all of this water, the whole lot will just fall out in one big solid lump. And that's more like a wave.
That's more like it, Richard, yeah.
Well, to complete this demonstration of a lump of water, I've got this. It's a sort of industrial dining table with a glass top to give it its full. What'll happen is we'll position the bag above there on the crane, fire the explosives, bang, no bottom in the bag, all of the water comes down in one go onto there, and, well, we'll see what happens. Part of me thinks even in a solid lump, the water will get here and then just sort of pour around the sides, and the biggest problem we'll have is a puddle.
You'll see. It's going to punch through that glass.
All right. Well, I'm going to make a suggestion. Whatever happens, let's watch.
Now, I've always thought of water as kind of soft stuff which flows around things. Sure, in a high-pressure jet, it's good for cleaning the car. Cubic metre of it falling onto thick plate glass?
Ah! The box. Really can't hear a thing there.
Nice loud countdown.
Sorry?
And then nice loud countdown and press the button.
OK. This is it, for real. Here we go. Here comes a wave. Stand by in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, there was quite a big bang. Thank you for the big bang. Yeah, too much explosive. That's really... Well, you can see the thickness of the glass now. It's 10 mil thick. You can stand on that.
Our ton of water only fell a couple of metres, and it still had huge destructive power. Compared to the power of the waves in the Gulf, however, it is a drop in the ocean. The biggest waves that batter the artificial island can deliver hundreds of tons of force. Each wave can be the equivalent of 130 small cars crashing into it. So how do you protect your island from the extreme forces of the waves?
I think we'll take our inspiration, Richard, from this little group of jacks.
So these are jacks. Now, forgive me, but it seems like quite a lot, because how do they take the energy out of the wave?
Well, this is more a modern version of the jack. These things interlock together.
So the principle here is these shapes interlock.
And the space between them, the water swirls within and loses its energy.
So it's these holes
It's the
that are
holes that
doing
are
the
key.
work.
Yeah, the holes. It's nothing creates something.
Holes are the answer. Well, sort of. Holes were first used in revolutionary jack-shaped sea defences created by South African harbour engineers. They saw a local version of jacks being played and, fascinated by how the jacks interlocked, successfully redesigned the harbour defences for East London. Almost all coastal defences still rely on this idea of holes. The Burj Al Arab. I'm creating a furniture protection system inspired by the sea defences used to protect the hotel, in which spaces are the secret ingredient. Instead of trying to stop waves dead with a wall, the idea was to create a series of spaces, holes, that absorb the energy of the sea. And we're going to see if the same will protect my spare dining table.
It will be the holes doing the work, I hope. We need to clear off out of the way. And let's do it again, only this time, my table will survive. Probably. Your theory.
I know.
Our homemade defences will use the holes in the tyres to redirect the water. It will swish around and should fall harmlessly at the bottom.
All right, I have every faith.
Let's give it a go.
If we've done our homework right, this will save the glass, just as it saves the Burj Al Arab's man-made island.
If we're ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is one of those occasions when just from seeing something you suddenly really understand it, because you can the breakwater break that big lump of water up into just eddies and swirls and bits. And it really was the holes doing the work.
The holes did all the work. Net effect, a protected table, a protected island, a protected hotel.
Not that my table isn't important.
In Dubai, the Burj Al Arab engineers used exactly the same principle for breaking up waves, except they used concrete, not old tires. Their defences create a smooth, elegant and uniform shape, suitable for keeping a world-class hotel's head above water.
The holes are so good in the energy out of waves that the island could be built at just 7.5 metres above sea level.
Keeping the island relatively low allows the architects to continue the illusion of a boat on the water. But what I think is fascinating is how the architects completed the boat itself inside the sea defences.
Those are just the shell of the island. They needed to fill the middle in with something, and they chose sand. Now, I guess it's not like it's in short supply around here, but call me old-fashioned. I've never thought of sand as the ideal material to make firm foundations for a building, especially one that size.
The Burj Al Arab is 321 metres high, slightly taller than the Eiffel Tower. How does it possibly stand on sea without keeling over in the first stiff breeze? Through a remarkably simple scientific principle, in fact.
Skin friction is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the friction between the skin, the surfaces of objects. If I rub my hands together, friction generates heat. I can feel it. Now, ordinarily, skin friction is
It's there, but it's pretty easily overcome. So pages together, I can feel the friction between them, but there's not a lot of it. However, if I multiply that effect by as many times as there are pages in these directories, let's see what happens. I'm going to interleave them. Page 1, 2. Skin friction is one of the factors that keep the standing tall. Mind you, I think they built the hotel in less time than it's taken to do this.
1,407, 1,408. There we go. Oh, now, according to the theory, the effects of skin friction should have been magnified by as many times as there are interfaces between the pages that I've interleaved. It took a while. I didn't have much else on this afternoon. The only thing is, knowing how long it took, I'm reluctant to test it, but I'm going to. Is it? I'm pulling as hard as I possibly can. There's no glue. That is just skin friction. There's no way can I pull that apart. I mean, that is... Honestly, I'm trying as hard as I can. No. To try harder. Okay. Should be more like it. Obviously, skin friction already doing well just to hold this shackle on. Remember, nothing holding it, just the friction between the pages. Right, lift it, please. How good is skin friction? I mean, really, how good? Up! OK. Time to demonstrate, if nothing else, my faith in science. Yeah, skin friction. That's all that's holding me up, and the weight of that shackle. Remember, no pins in there, no nails, nothing. Just friction.
And friction is also one of the answers to building on unstable material, even sand. Otherwise, the enormous tower would just topple over. The solution was to use reinforced concrete pile foundations, which are like long nails driven into the ground. They work using skin friction to keep the building in place, even in loose sand.
To show how strong pile foundations can be, a simple demonstration. Jar of uncooked rice and a knife. Put knife into rice. Something called skin friction in action.
Skin friction is strong enough to support a 20-metre tall tower on sand. There are 9.5 kilometres of concrete piles, poured 43 metres into the sand under the hotel to keep it upright and safe. Think of it as a page in the directory. Every one makes the bond stronger. Combined, they make the sand as solid as a rock and keep the building standing tall. In temperatures can reach a blistering 49 degrees Celsius. And that heat posed a challenge for engineers and architects working with steel.
Metal, like most materials, expands up. Think about it, if you've got the lid stuck on a jar, warm it up a bit and the metal lid will expand and you can free it. That's a good thing. We're working on giant metal trusses and they're expanding and contracting according to the temperature at different times of day, and you're trying to fit them together in a very precise way. It's going to be tricky.
The Burj Al Arab constructed using a steel exoskeleton, an external frame. The 6 steel trusses that support the building's weight are up to 85 metres long. That's longer than a jumbo jet. In the desert heat, the lengths of steel could expand by 5 centimetres, which was critical during construction when everything had to come together exactly.
These 2 steel triangles will represent the huge steel trusses on the Burj, and they really are huge, 80 metres. The principles will be the same even at this scale. So they've been machined very accurately, so they can be fixed together using these fixings. That goes in there, that mounts in the hole. And one here. So that's my steel structure firmly fixed together. But it hasn't yet had to cope with the problems of desert heat and the problems of heat expansion associated with it. Could be waiting a while here for some desert heat, but that's okay, we can bring our own. Gas axe, please. Thank you. While he's firing that up, I'm going to remove one of these fixings because I want to see the effect of that thermal expansion. Right. Well, that was, I think we can agree, a hot day. But if I try and put my original fixing back in, line it up, machine so the holes should align, and... oh, surprise, surprise, they don't. There's absolutely no way is that going to... because the metal's expanded, the holes ended up in the wrong place.
When the top metal bar undergoes thermal expansion, it becomes longer, but the bottom one stays the same. This means that the holes in each no longer align.
If this were 80 times bigger, imagine the effect it would have then. But what can you do about it? The steel trusses are going to grow and shrink, depending upon the time of day and the temperature. That will happen. It's disastrous. You could end up with the crooked tower. The engineers found an ingenious solution, thanks to the cam of an engine. Cams are used, of course, in car engines. You've probably heard of a camshaft. Well, here is one. This is the top of the engine. This assembly here is to operate the valves, which would be in the cylinder bores below. They have to open and close very quickly to let fuel and air in and exhaust gases out. That's where the cams come in. So I'm going to be the engine turning here. And as I rotate the camshaft, you can see the cams move eccentrically. These lobes where they bulge and stick out. Push down on this assembly here, open the valve, and then shut it. It's a clever principle and one that's been used for a long time.
The off-center bulge of a cam allows it to open and close engine valves on each rotation of the camshaft. The builders of the Burj Al Arab borrowed from that idea to overcome the problems caused by extreme desert heat.
This fixing, it's called an eccentric fixing. It's been designed using, well, the same sort of principle. This is like a cam inside this hole here, and that gives us the flexibility we need to cope with this heat expansion. So let's put it in, line it up roughly in the big hole there. And if I drop that in, we can maneuver it around, and there it is. That lines up perfectly. That's the connection between the engine's cam and our fixings for building in the desert.
The eccentric fixing allows the top hole to be moved, so that no matter how much the steel expands, it can still be to the bottom hole. Engineers at the hotel, taking their inspiration from engine cams, designed bespoke movable fixings that allowed them to install massive trusses accurately, despite the thermal expansion. Once installed, everything was welded firmly in place. Now the building expands and contracts as a whole, keeping it in. And when it was complete, it could be covered or closed, literally. Having the tallest in the world caused a huge headache for the engineers. Make the wall solid, and you have an enormous dark cave. One wall out of glass, and you create an enormous oven. The solution lay in making the world's largest cloth wall. But they didn't use any old cloth. They used glass fibre.
So whilst the entire wall allows light through, making the atrium feel bright and airy, it blocks the harshest of the rays and stops them from roasting the guests and blinding them with glare.
Modern glass fibres are strong, light and transparent. The wall is made by spinning thin filaments of glass into fibres and weaving them into a cloth. The cloth allows a small percentage of the sun's energy through, enough to illuminate the room, but not overheat it.
So it really is that beautiful sail that means guests walk into the atrium and find refuge from the heat and glare of the desert outside. It's an oasis.
In the baking heat of the desert, the ultimate luxuries must be a cool, air-conditioned room. Even when temperatures approach 50 Celsius outside, the interior of the Burj Al Arab maintains a balmy 23 degrees. But keeping it this way isn't as simple as you might think.
Creating and maintaining an oasis in the desert presented the engineers with a series of challenges right from the very beginning.
The problem is managing the big difference between temperatures inside and outside the hotel. On a hot day, the difference between the two can be 20 degrees Celsius. Temperature differences create pressure differences. In nature, big pressure differences create violent winds, even hurricanes. Pressure differences affect all skyscrapers. They're especially bad in a structure the size of the Burj Al Arab in the desert. It could literally stop people getting in and out of the building. Back on home soil, Professor of Building Engineering Physics Doug King explains why combining air conditioning, a tall building and a scorching desert can stack up big trouble.
So these big temperature differences, although they make nicer inside the building, they can bring big problems.
Absolutely. And we're going to demonstrate that with this model, which is a scale model atrium at the Burj.
I did wonder. It's not as big, is it?
No, unfortunately, we couldn't get one that big in here, so we've had to scale things down a bit. We've got a light bulb at the bottom, which is representing the heat gains from people and from the sun shining in through the windows onto the floor. And we've got about 1 kilogram of dry ice at the top, which is representing the cooling effect of the air conditioning system.
The problem is all to do with airflow. An air pellet will show how the air circulates. Heat from people and the sun through the windows on the ground cause the air to rise. The air conditioning cools it down, making it more dense, and the air falls.
We've got upflow on the one side, and we've got downflow on the other side.
Leaving you with a tall column of cold, heavy air surrounded by the hot desert, which doesn't sound like a problem.
I still don't see why the big problem.
If the building stays closed, it's not a problem. The problem happens when we've got this big stack of cold air inside, we've got warm air outside, and it's all being held back by the front door. So why don't you open the door and see what happens?
Right, there's a door down here.
Yeah,
Open the door and
that's
see.
the one.
OK, so I'll open the door.
Yes. What's happening now? See how quickly it's clearing down? You've got this big column of cold air inside, which is much heavier than the air outside, and it's all being forced out through that little opening.
So that's, on this scale, you can see it's rushing out. That's not just tumbling out because I've opened the door. That's being pushed out.
That's right.
By this pressure difference.
And see how quickly all of that air inside the model has fallen down and pushed the air out through the door.
So if that's how it works on this scale, how big a problem does it represent for something the size of Burj Al Arab?
Well, for something as big as that atrium, it's 180 metres high, that's an enormous stack of cold air. Very, very dense at the bottom. Opening that door against that pressure is going to be trying to lift a sack of potatoes.
To be more precise, the vast atrium at the Burj Al Arab, combined with the heat of the desert outside, could create the equivalent of 21 bags of sugar pressing against the door.
So, 21 kilo weight suspended from a pulley. This, then, is about as tough as it would be to open the door at the Burj Al Arab. I mean, it's not impossible, but it is a bit of a workout. And I don't think you want to work out every time you open the door, especially if you've saved up to book a suite.
With the largest atrium in the world, this problem is especially acute for the Burj Al Arab. The unwanted stack effect was first noticed with the rise of the skyscraper. Workers in New York and Chicago complained not only of drafts, but that they couldn't even open the doors of their buildings because of pressure differences inside and outside.
One solution to the problem is to equalize the pressure inside the building with the pressure outside the building. But that would mean you'd need to equalize the temperature in here with the temperature out there in the desert. You wouldn't be able to heat or cool the building. And I think having the temperature in here hover around the 40 mark does rather spoil the whole idea of an oasis in the desert. The hotel might lose a star or two for that.
What you need is a means of getting between two areas of different pressure, outside on the street and inside the hotel, without allowing the pressures to equalize.
There was a different solution, and it came from something inspired by a 19th century French coal mine.
In 1839, French mining engineer Jacques Triget overcame the problem of moving between two areas of different pressure in waterlogged coal mines. He created the world's first airlock.
This is how Triget's system works. This is my waterlogged ground. Well, it's glass, but you know what I mean. Here's my mine shaft. If I just sink a mine shaft into waterlogged ground like this, well, it's just full of water at the bottom. Nobody can work down there. The answer to that, fairly simple. Seal it at the top. That stops the air getting out, which means the water can't get in. That's all well and good until you need to open the top to let your workers go down the mine. Then it floods with water again. The answer to that one, establish your dry mine shaft, fit an airlock at the top where workers in. Then once they're safely in, seal it behind them. Everything stays dry, everybody's happy. What we did at the Burj Al Arab was some sort of airlock so they could separate the pressure inside the hotel from the pressure outside. Sounds complicated, like something off a space station. But in fact, I've just been through it. It's a revolving door.
Revolving doors are designed in such a way that there's never a direct opening to the street. The inside is sealed from the outside, even when the door is spinning. First used in Rector's Restaurant in Times Square in New York in 1899, it was always open, always closed, because the door keeps a seal even when you go through it. This makes the sort of airlock that's needed to stop the big outrush of air that would happen because of the static. Now everyone who can afford it can come and go in comfort. But comfort brings its own difficulties.
It's probably not surprising that pretty much every electronic gizmo conceivable has been incorporated into these rooms, all operated by remote control. At the touch of a button, televisions drop down out of the ceiling or pop up out of pieces of furniture. You can change the temperature, open and close the doors, change the mood, adjust the lighting, dim it, make it romantic. That's right. So whilst all of this is great for the guests, it can be a bit of a headache for an electrical engineer.
Luxury calls for a lot of energy. Just the lights in one suite can draw more power than all the appliances in each home burn in a whole day. And making the mood romantic could have shocking consequences.
So to dim the lights, simply press a button. Really not complicated, we're all familiar with dimmers. But simply pressing that button could have had a catastrophic effect.
The origin of the potential problem lies in what happens to an electrical current when you dim the bulb. It can heat the wires to abnormal levels and start a fire. To show what can go wrong when you're adjusting the ambience, we're going to check into my own replica luxury hotel room. I've brought electrical expert Paul Mitchison along to create a sophisticated lighting system.
Oh yeah, home from home. No, not back in the Burj Al Arab. This is my replica. There's no ensuite yet, or jacuzzi, or underfloor heating, but it's got a bedside table and plastic roses. Everything the modern luxury bedroom, including lights. Yeah, they don't really come on and off when you do that. That's just Paul out there operating them. Still, thank you. There it is, all working perfectly.
My shed may not be an authentic replica, but it has two crucial similarities. It has a high voltage supply for the electrical systems, and it has a dimming system. Paul, in addition to providing adult supervision, has set up a high-tech monitoring station, complete with a complicated array of gauges and test equipment.
Paul, to me, as a customer staying in my luxury hotel room, I mean, the lights are on, that's it. What actually is going on in there? What's happening?
So at the moment, what we're doing is we have a waveform that we can see here on the oscilloscope, and this is electric current, which is powering the lights. At the moment, the key thing to note here really is that this is a very smooth waveform.
So this is what a normal current looks like on an oscilloscope. It's regular and safe.
So a smooth waveform there, all right. But what if I change things a bit? This is when I want to change. That's a luxury bedroom. I think that light, it's a bit harsh.
You want something a bit more cosy?
Yeah. So I'd like to change the light setting. I'd like to have, instead of 3 on full, I'd like to put 6 lights on, but dim.
Okay, so in that case, what we could do is we could dim that, bring up another 3.
It's a much better ambience in there. But just... That's the same amount of light. We just got 6 lights on, but lower.
That's correct.
So,
same amount of power into the light.
We can see from the oscilloscope that something has changed drastically.
So what's different?
The problem is now is that we're delivering power to the lights in short bursts.
So
and
that's how the power's been halved, then?
That's exactly right, yes.
Because I always thought it was... A dimmer was like a tap. Because if you turn a tap on full, and then that's too much, you turn it down halfway, and half the amount of water comes out. And I thought it was the same. You just turn it down, and half the amount of electricity goes to the light.
So it's more like turning the tap on and then off, and then on and then off.
Modern dimmer switches basically shut off the power to the light 120 times a second. It has the effect of not letting the light ever achieve full brightness. It also has effect.
So it's the same amount of electricity but being switched on and off very quickly.
That's right.
Well, why is that different? Why does that upset?
So the problem is that you're only delivering the power for a short period of time. And in order to do that, you introduce extra heating effects in the wires.
An electrical current in a wire always creates a certain amount of heat, but adding a dimmer switch can add extra heat to the wire, sometimes dangerously so. The on-off action of a dimmer switch creates so-called harmonic distortion, a sort of chaotic current in the wires, frequencies the system isn't designed to deal with. A wire heating up doesn't sound too ominous. It might smolder away, but in the wrong circumstances, that wire might ignite flammable items close to it. If, for example, someone had carelessly left the exposed wire on a waste paper basket of cotton wool, which might happen to be soaked in nail varnish remover. With 6 lights on, let's see what does happen.
Yeah, my hotel's on fire. Just so you know, that's a lot of heating.
That took less than 20 seconds to catch. You really wouldn't want that in a top-class hotel.
The shed's on fire. You've ruined my hotel quite badly. Yeah, that is... I see your point. That is a potential problem.
Yeah.
Cool, blimey. Bloody hell. Man, that's hot.
Obviously, this is a very exaggerated scenario. Electricians don't generally run wires through flammable bins of cotton wool. But if it is a serious threat, how come dimmers are so common? Why isn't there a fire if someone wants to change the ambiance? That could ruin the mood. It's because of electrical defects that include part of a camera's flash.
Yeah, that's... I do see your point.
Yeah, it's not great, is it?
No, my hotel's ruined. So clearly, that needs to be avoided, and it is because they have... That doesn't happen. So what's the solution?
So the solution is the capacitor that's in the camera flash. So we're all familiar with regular camera.
Early camera flashes used explosive powder to create the lights. But carrying that around was not for the faint-hearted. They needed a safe, portable alternative. And the solution came in the form of an electrical component known as a capacitor. In cameras, the capacitor stores up energy and releases it all at once, setting off the flash. But in buildings, combined with they act like filters, removing the chaotic currents that can cause fires.
This is a regular capacitor. So this is the thing that allows you to take energy more slowly and release it back to the light.
But all that does is it accumulates this energy and then it releases it at a controllable rate and stops
that happening.
Burning your shed down.
I wish I'd known that 10 minutes ago. I'd still have a shed. The Burj Al Arab's capacitors are in the building. With the inductors, they are the unsung electrical heroes that protect the hotel from itself and its pampered guests.
I guess it is a relief to know that when I dim the lights, I'm not going to set fire to the Burj Al Arab. I imagine the bill would be quite big if I did. Yeah, I'd never get that through on expenses.
Designers of this amazing building didn't limit the spectacle just to the structure. It is, after all, a hotel. The guests will spend most of their time inside looking around, not outside looking in.
When it comes to earning its keep, this building is all about symbolising luxury and opulence. So what could be the best possible luxury here in a hotel perched in a scorching desert of sand and sea?
Yep, fountains. Think about it, a fountain is the ultimate in opulence. And not just any old fountains, a series of digitally controlled £1 billion masterpieces. And whilst fountains are pretty and all that, it takes surprising engineering to create the flair.
You need to be seen to do something extravagant, opulent with the water. And the water features here are an engineering feat in their own right. Mesmerising. Sometimes the water doesn't even look like water.
That's because it's not behaving like water. Normal water, that is. Normal water can't move like this does. To allow it to play these tricks, you need to eliminate turbulence. It has to achieve an almost unreal glassy smoothness. Something called a flow.
Here comes, if you need it, a quick reminder of how water behaves in a flow normally. There it goes. Now that's, well, it's just a mess. That's because of turbulence. There's lots of eddies and flows and swirls in there, which is fine for use here on the farm. But if those beautiful, polished, glass-like tubes in the fountains at the Burj Al Arab, you need to smooth that flow out. You need to lamina. And to do that, the engineers turned to a type of hose used to help put out fires in skyscrapers.
The 1930s, buildings grew taller. Firefighters needed to stream water higher to quench towering infernos. A helpful hydraulic engineer realized that turbulence reduced the range of fires because the water flow broke up in air. His invention to smooth out the flow in hoses to make it more laminar was the key to the Burj Al Arab's glassy fountains.
Right, quick quiet minute before we do the next bit. I'm going to be finding out about this laminar flow business, which as far as I can understand is all about doing, well, what seems impossible. For example, my coffee. Don't worry, they'll get a coffee too once they've earned it. If I stir in... There we go. Stir it all in. There you go. It's all mixed up thoroughly.
Wouldn't it be kind of cool? You could unstir it and then be sort of left with a blob of milk and black coffee. So maybe if I stir the way and... Well, no, obviously you can't. That would be turning back time. We haven't yet conquered time travel, and you can't unstir coffee unless you can make water behave in a fully laminar way. Amazingly, however, you can unstir some liquids. Professor Tom Mullen from Manchester University, expert in fluid dynamics, shows me how.
So, Tom, with this device, I'm not sure we're about to spin a salad or do some eating. And what's this got to do with laminar flow, whatever that is, and trying to unstir my coffee? That's your mission, to explain all of that.
Oh. Well, what you have to do is put these coloured dye into the fluid, and then we'll stir it around. What happens?
All right.
The liquid inside is thick, viscous sugar syrup.
Yeah, a bit further along here, this direction.
Right.
And the coloured blobs are the same stuff with food dye added.
OK, that's fine.
3 blobs, good, not much flowing, laminar or otherwise going on right now.
Now we have to create the flow, and so to create the flow, what we're going to do is turn the handle, say, 5 times in that direction.
Right, so that's
fine.
It's quite thick stuff. 1.
It's very sticky fluid.
2.
Keep going.
3. 4. 5. OK, I've done that.
Now it looks like we've created a right mix.
Yes, yes. It's all gone.
What we need to do, or what you'd like to do, is go backwards the same number of turns.
So I'm literally unstirring it. I feel like somebody might be having a laugh at my expense. 1. 2. 3. 4.
Slow down a bit. Just keep going slowly a bit. Slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. And there you have...
Look at that!
Your 3 bobs back again.
I've literally unstirred it. That's a great party trick.
Thick, viscous liquids like sugar syrup are very smooth. It's easy to make them move in a laminar way. They don't behave turbulently like water, so you can unstir them and make the blobs reappear. If water behaved like that, you could unstir your coffee. To make a flow in a laminar fashion, you need to remove the turbulence with a laminar flow nozzle.
Well, the good news immediately is, now correct me if I'm wrong, this would appear to be laminar flow in water.
This is laminar flow that's coming out of this nozzle here, whereas this is turbulent flow. The reason you can tell immediately it's turbulent is because you can see it. It scatters the light. And in this case, it's nice and glassy smooth, and it's laminar.
OK, so quite a simple difference, really. Neat, tidy and elegant, scruffy and a mess. To achieve this, it needs this device here that looks like something out of a 60s sci-fi movie. What is it?
You have turbulence, and then what happens is the flow goes through these gauzes, through these straws and so on, and so the turbulence decays as it comes through here, and you end up with laminar flow coming out of the nozzle.
The gauze and straws effectively smooth the water, removing the bubbles and swirls that cause turbulence. Non-turbulent water can flow quicker and more smoothly.
So to solve the problem, then, of fast-moving laminar flow in water for the Burj Al Arab's fountains, what you need is a device like this to move the water down.
Yes.
And smoothly flowing water also helped firefighters. In the 30s, American engineer Horace Barker had a brainwave. He realized that removing turbulent water traveled further. His new fire hose design had metal feathers inside that aligned the water as it left, reducing this turbulence. Barker's flow straightener extended the range of fire hoses. The smooth water flow traveled further, so firefighters could tackle blazes on the higher floors of skyscrapers more easily. Laminar flow nozzles go one step further than Barker's device, removing all turbulence and smoothing the water to a glassy finish. The fountains at the Burj Al Arab incorporate 66 laminar flow nozzles. Pretty sure theirs aren't made from drinking straws, though. Either way, they allow for breathtaking display. You see, the crucial thing about the Burj Al Arab is that it's all about the bling. It's engineering to impress, not just to survive. All these engineering achievements have made the Burj Al Arab a spectacular feature on Dubai's skyline.
The Burj Al Arab instantly joined the world's iconic landmarks, becoming the face of Dubai, synonymous with its reinvention as a luxury playground. Behind the glitz, the glamour and the spectacular show, there is some amazing and solid engineering.
And none of it would have been possible without a game of jacks, an engine cam, the pages of a phone book, in fire hose design, and a camera flash.
You've ruined my hotel, man.
Japan's bullet train, the world's first high-speed railway. Still the most technically advanced in the world. In its life, it's shifted the equivalent of the entire population of Earth at nearly 300 kilometers an hour.
The Japanese high-speed is very different from a normal train. You don't just add a more powerful locomotive. It doesn't even have a locomotive in the traditional sense. A normal train can't stand the stresses of high speeds. You need to redesign. In fact, along the way, you'll need to reinvent the wheel. And that called for some surprising engineering connections. The bullet train wouldn't have been possible without
Ancient chariot racing.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, eat your heart out, Ben-Hur. A medieval clock.
Oh, that really is moving. The stopping's going to be uncomfortable, obviously.
A 19th century luxury car.
On my train just can't get enough grip to get me moving.
And the electric telegraph.
Any sign of an earthquake?
Yeah, there's something coming down.
Right.
Japan, a rugged, mountainous land. Most of the population is squeezed into some of the largest cities. Getting around the country is a challenge. Space for roads is restricted, and to move all the travellers by air, 3 jumbo jets would have to take off every 5 minutes. So the Japanese chose the train for mass transport. They transformed the humble train into an iconic and sophisticated engineering marvel.
This is the N700 bullet train. Of pioneering high-speed trains, and well, it even looks fast, which it is, close on 200 miles an hour, 300 kilometers an hour in regular service. But if you think it's all about what happens here at the pointy end, you'd be wrong. It's much more radical than that. The whole thing is a system designed to get up to speed, then to corner safely and comfortably, to stop automatically if there's an earthquake. It is
Quite a train. How do you turn a normal train into a bullet train? It starts with the simplest thing. The shape of the wheels. You would think the one-wheeled vehicle would have no problems at all. Is a straight piece of track like this. I mean, you've got wheels, rails, no bends. What can go wrong? In fact, everything can go wrong if the wheels are the wrong shape. I mean, it's still round. Round is good in a wheel. But it's the part that touches the track here that makes contact. That is absolutely critical. Without the help of a medieval clock, a high-speed train could simply throw itself off the rails. No need to take my word for it, because I've brought my very own carriage to the Hammond Railway's proving ground for its inaugural journey to test its wheels. It's not a grand design. It doesn't even have its own power, but that doesn't matter because I've got a powerful winch to drag it along this dead straight piece of track at speeds of up to 80 kilometers an hour. Unfortunately, Hammond Railways don't stretch to basic amenities, like seats. That's one of the reasons why I won't be riding on my carriage. The other reason is, well, it doesn't have any brakes. I did say it was basic. It'll be brought to a complete and probably quite sudden halt by that barrier down there. On the plus side, this does have everything we need to show just what high-speed train engineers are up. Namely, we've fitted it with these train-style wheels. They're exaggerated, yes, but just like real train wheels, they're conical, angled where they rest on the track. They might look pretty odd, but according to Paul, an expert in wheel dynamics, they'll show clearly what happens to real trains travelling at speed. Finally, Hammond Rail is offering a feature never before seen on trains: basketballs on poles. They'll show how the carriage moves. He's revving his V8 muscle car from 1970s. Goes. As it speeds down the track at about 65 kilometers an hour, the carriage is rocking from side to side. It's called hunting oscillation. Is that why the his posts are moving side to side?
Yeah, you can see it hunting a bit now.
That's not gone at all well for it. It's a bad thing. The kind of thing you need to avoid in a real train. And this isn't just a problem for Hammond Rail. Real trains have derailed on straight track, and the repeated sideways movement can also damage the track itself, like this one in Germany. Wobbling along a dead straight track is the fault of those cone-shaped wheels. So they don't seem like such a good idea. Why aren't they flat?
Well, the problem with flat wheels is we need to get round a curve.
Yeah.
So if we try and do that with flat wheels, right. I've got my flat wheel here. We run it down the track.
See, it works. It doesn't work. It doesn't
not
work.
So much.
Yes, but we all know train wheels, they're round, but then they have like a flange on them that keeps them in the track. Flanges are the metal lips that sit down the side of the tracks.
We could put flanges on the wheels, but the trouble is then the wheels will be guided around the curve purely on these flanges, and we'll wear them out the sides of the rails out. They'll all be wrecked.
Very quickly.
Very quickly, yes.
So, it's back to those conical wheels.
Someone clever came along and thought, well, if we put some cone angles, then we might be able to get this to go around.
Go on, then. Somebody came up with this.
OK.
So it's off. That's where the other one got to. And it's just... well, it works.
It works.
Clearly. And that's just its shape.
Exactly,
that's
yes.
sending it round. A cone on its side turns in a circle, and train wheels use this principle. As it goes round a bend, the train is thrown. The side wheel effectively gets bigger, making a sort of cone which turns the train.
Because conical wheels can effectively change size, they can make trains unstable, even on straight track, causing that hunting oscillation we saw, especially at bullet train type speeds.
The solution is an engineering compromise. So what we try and do is we get just the right amount of cone angle to get us around the curves we need to get round, but no more than that.
So there will be an optimum amount of slope, cone,
yes,
for a train that's going to go faster.
Yes, so very high-speed trains have very low angle or kineticity, and slower trains have much more kineticity.
So the slope on a conventional train wheel is flat for the bullet train. The angle is halved. Each wheel is machined to the perfect angle. And what's good enough for a bullet train is good enough for Hammond. I'm exchanging my extreme conical wheels for flatter ones. I've also added some weight to try and stop it derailing again. I'll admit, rail doesn't offer a complete service yet. No return tickets. You have to push yourself back to the station. Inconvenient, but cheap. Here he goes.
So what we're looking for here is a steady ride.
Nice ride. No hunting.
That's perfectly happy.
That is going quick, actually.
God, that really is moving. The stopping's going to be uncomfortable, obviously, in a real situation.
The flatter wheels have eliminated hunting oscillation. Look how steady the basketball telltales. My carriage travels straight and true on the rails, which means it can go really far. But still nowhere near as fast as a bullet train. For those kinds of speeds, the engineers couldn't just rely on flatter wheels to avoid hunting oscillation.
They needed a two-part solution, the second part of which lay at the heart of a medieval clock.
Before clocks were invented, time was pretty fluid, but medieval monks wanted regular prayer times. They needed precise clocks.
And that particular prayer was answered for them around the middle of the 15th century with the invention of a new type of clock. And the device that transformed clockmaking, monastic life, and ultimately the bullet train was this, the coiled spring. And there's one in here, in this clock as well. All it does, as you wind it, it coils itself around itself tighter and tighter, and that's storing energy. Then as it unwinds itself slowly, that energy is released, and it's that energy that's used to turn the gears and cogs that turn the hands and tell us time. And with a little bit of tweaking, this horological motor would go on to help solve the problem of hunting oscillation on the bullet train.
Because coiled springs are also good for suspension systems. By stretching and squashing, they smooth out bumps in the road, as car mechanics discovered in the 20th century.
And train engineers adopted the same idea. Coiled springs are particularly good for trains because they don't just absorb up and down motion, they also dampen side-to-side rocking. On the bullet train, coiled springs absorb the energy of the hunting oscillation. Stiffer springs absorb more energy, so they dampen the sideways movement, so the train can't rock as violently. Right, they are actually building trains here, so I'll get out of their way.
Thanks to some punctual monks and clever watchmakers, the engineers were able to design a train undercarriage that stops it hunting, shaking from side to side at high speeds. With flatter wheels, the train rolls so straight that it wears an almost perfect line along the rails. The machining of the wheels is the beginning of the journey for the bullet train. Engineers assemble them starting with those wheels. They're attached to axles. The coiled springs are fitted, I'm fascinated to see how basic some of the engineering is, though on a huge scale.
Well, I've done kind of some of the jobs they're doing, but small scale with maybe a motorbike. But look at the brakes when I get the pads and the calipers over the sides of the wheels with the discs incorporated into the wheels. Sorry, I'm just really enjoying this.
Once the final bits of undercarriage are lowered onto the axle, the main body of the train is added above it. It ends up like this, a brand new bullet train. And once built, it's ready to take its first high-speed journey. I wonder if they've left the keys in.
Here it is, the business end. I'm guessing flat out. At what, close to 200 miles an hour, 300 kilometers an hour. Being a train driver is quite exciting again. This might be the one that is actually wired up and ready to go. It'll be driven out of here. But not now, not by me.
Probably just as well they didn't leave the keys. But what happens if you do switch the train on? To move at all, let alone reach breakneck speed, the bullet train needs power. And it gets all the power it needs in the form of electricity from overhead lines.
The connection between the wire and the train is this device along here, the pantograph. So electricity flows in through those few square centimetres where it touches the wire, and from there, down into the train.
To feed enough power, engineers faced a choice between a faster or a bigger electrical flow, snapping up the voltage or boosting the current. In a lab that looks more like the sci-fi movie, Manchester University professor Ian Cotton shows the demands big currents make.
So, Ian, talk me through this. I'm guessing current is going to go around there somewhere.
Yes, we have a transformer from the mains, and in this loop we get our current.
All right. Well, fire it up then. Is it working now?
It will do. You'll see the numbers on the ammeter go up, so that means we're flowing through the loop.
So this is the quantity of amps flying through here. Oh, hang on, look already. This wire is getting hot.
High amps of big current overload the thin wire. It heats it up to the point of complete failure.
So if you have very, very high currents, you need to use a very big piece of to let the current flow.
So for our train, we'd need much bigger than this?
Absolutely. It would be very, very big and very, very heavy.
To carry enough current for the bullet train, the overhead wires would have to be huge, thick as an arm, and enormously expensive. Totally impractical for train lines that run for hundreds of kilometers. The only other way to give the train the juice it needs was to up the flow, the voltage. Train lines usually carry 1,500 or 3,000 volts, nowhere near enough for a bullet train. So engineers increased it to 25,000 volts. But with such a gigantic voltage, any break in the circuit between the wire and pantograph can be catastrophic.
The pantograph has not just one job, to maintain that contact with the wire overhead. But it is quite an important job, because lose that and you lose power, which would be inconvenient.
Worse, you might damage the train. If the pantograph loses contact, it causes an arc. In the safety of a high-voltage lab, an arc looks very pretty.
Woo! So what are we seeing here?
So this is something called a Jacob's ladder, and we're making a high which is travelling up.
Arcing happens when there's a break in a high-voltage circuit. In a Jacob's ladder, there's a circuit between the two poles. The voltage is so high that it turns the gap into plasma, superheated air. And plasma is very hot, close to 10,000 degrees C, making it very dangerous indeed.
That's arcing that we're looking at.
Exactly, so that's what would happen if the pantograph moved away from the actual wire.
Arcing does happen on normal trains. Here, icy overhead wires are breaking the circuit. But the higher the voltage, the more arcing is a problem. In this demonstration, I use a pantograph to see what happens to my paper train when the connection is broken.
So this is a demonstration of the potential bad side of high voltage.
Yeah, so the copper bar is at high voltage, and if you touch that pole to it and move it away, you'll make a high voltage arc.
OK. There we go. But when it gets near to things... Aha! Yeah, straight away that's... Do you know, I can see the downside there. What's happened is it set fire to my train quite badly.
OK, so it's no surprise that the plasma arc ignites a paper train, but it can also damage a real train and its overhead wires. To prevent damage that could take whole lines out of action, the engineers needed a pantograph that would not lose contact with the overhead wire.
And the key to their solution lies in this. It's just a crowbar. Well, a lever. And used in the right way, keep the pantograph pressing against the wire no matter what.
Which is a good thing, because you really don't want to mess about with dodgy connections and massively powerful electrical supplies.
Levers are essentially pretty simple devices. There's something long, like this, that pivots around a fulcrum, like that.
The longer the lever, the more it can lift.
So, to move something heavy, like this anvil, I'm going to need a longer lever. Yeah, that should do the job. In place, and, well, that's... It was the Greek scientist Archimedes who first worked out the significance of the distance between fulcrum and where the force on a lever. He reckoned, rather famously, that with a long enough lever he could move the Earth, though he would, of course, have needed somewhere to stand.
The bullet train's unique pantograph acts like a lever too. The spring pulls the pantograph up. If the spring contracts, it pulls with less force. To compensate, a cunning mechanism automatically lengthens a lever, increasing the force.
The whole thing is a compensatory mechanism, and the result is a pressure against that wire.
And so far, they've been able to keep the train supplied with high voltage power without frying the pantographs. With power on board, engineers face their next challenge. How to convert the power to speed. And in particular, how to make a train fast from a standing start. It needs the right balance of power and grip.
Making something fast isn't just about making it more powerful. You need to consider its weight too. Light is good. That's why they don't make fast cars out of lead, you may have noticed. But here's the thing. You can make something too light.
If a vehicle's too light, it can't grip the ground enough to get traction, which is how things like cars and trains turn engine power into movement. Without traction, you're not going anywhere, no matter how big your engine. To demonstrate, I've created my own train and a very slippery track for it to run on.
Yeah, well, as I think you can see, no matter how much power I use, no matter how much oomph I give it, giving it plenty, my wheels on my train just can't get enough grip to get me moving. In fact, sometimes the more power I use, the worse it gets.
The train doesn't have good traction because it's too light to grip properly. Of course, real trains don't run on skid pans, but they suffer from not having enough traction.
One way to improve traction is to increase weight, especially if the added weight is over the wheels, which in the case of this pickup is the rear wheels here at the back. All of which means that lot needs to go in there. So carry on, I'll be here. Isn't it great all together? Team effort. There we go. The last bag in place. I did all of that there. Those bags then, the weight right over the driven wheels at the back of the truck. Time to test it. We have added about half a ton above the rear axle. No contest. Same skid pan, more weight, better grip, better traction. But the last thing you want to do to a train designed for speed is add weight. Instead, bullet train engineers found the solution to their traction problems in an early luxury racing car, the Lohner Porsche. In 1899, Ferdinand Porsche, that Porsche, designed a pioneering car in which each wheel was by a separate motor, the first four-wheel drive. And as off-roaders the world over know, with more driven wheels, you get better traction. I'm going to need to modify this vehicle. Right, that's done. This truck is now four-wheel drive. More wheels driving, it should grip. And it does. Making all four wheels driven means better traction without added weight. And the Japanese did exactly the same with the bullet train, flipping the traditional train around completely. Conventional trains use locomotives, big, heavy powerhouses that pull or push the other carriages along. But the bullet train engineers have kind of turned its head because the pointy carriages at the front and the very back of this train have no engine. Instead, all the other carriages do. It's called a multiple unit system. And on this train, 14 of the 16 carriages have their own motor in here. Each motor drives two wheels, so it is, by my reckoning, 112-wheel drive. Good traction without the extra weight means it can accelerate suitably for a bullet train. All thanks to a 19th century 4x4. The next challenge for the engineers was how to keep that speed up round corners. Cornering too fast is a problem for any vehicle. This is Dave. He and his motorcycle sidecar are going to be the guinea pigs in my new challenge. This, by the way, isn't just an awkward to get at system. This water is part of the experiment. It's science. Take it away. Can Dave and the drinks complete my slalom course? Now we come to the first turn. Here we go. Dave and I go one way, and the drinks go the other.
I'm going to be thirsty. I mean, Dave, saw my drink's gone. No big surprises there, OK, but in the interest of science, we must dot the I's and cross the T's. We all know the feeling, if you've ever been around any sort of corner, when you feel you're being pushed to the side. It's called centrifugal force, and basically it's because your body as an object, wants to carry on going in a straight line, but the car, or bike, is pulling you that way. So relative to it, you feel a force throwing you that way.
And centrifugal force can have deadly consequences. In Osaka in 2005, a commuter train took a bend too fast and flew. 107 people died. Thankfully, derailment is rare, but tight bends and high speeds produce strong centrifugal forces. Bullet train engineers didn't want to slow the trains down. To get round, they turned to some of the very first wheeled vehicles. Chariots. Ancient charioteers knew how to corner quickly without flying off track, and so did their modern counterparts. This is a modern chariot, a scurry. Jeff Osborne is our Ben Hur, and these are his ponies, Zig and Zag.
So what am I going to do?
What you're going to do... Can't...
Steve, I thought I was just sitting a bit of passenger. I was going to bring a book.
No, you're not going to read a book. You're going to lean this way and lean that way.
So if I get it wrong...
We'll roll over.
These modern charioteers race around twists with lots of cornering. And to keep the scurry stable, usually Alison sits on the back and leans to the turns. But today, I'm doing it. No pressure then.
Never let go. For pony trips, you'll be straight out the back.
Bad. So, 1, 2, lean. 1, 2, lean, and I lean the way,
as
and
far
then in turn as far as I can get.
If the wheel starts coming off the ground, you lean further.
Right. So, after that, frankly, terrifying briefing, we're off.
This is nice. I like this speed. This is fast enough.
Leaning into bends reduces the centrifugal force, pushes us outwards. This balances the carriage and allows Zig and Zag, like their ancient counterparts, to corner faster. It's a technique first recorded by ancient Greek author Homer in his epic account of the the Iliad.
Ancient charioteers couldn't possibly have known about the Newtonian laws of inertia and centrifugal force. How could they? They hadn't been invented yet. But somehow they instinctively knew that leaning helps you turn faster. I'm sure it looks lovely, but it's really frightening.
But what about my mobile bar? To see if leaning is the key to success, I fired Dave and drafted in Frank.
So, I am going to try this again. I am determined to crack my motorcycle mobile refreshment system solution. And I'm going to use this, which is a rather motorcycle and sidecar outfit, because this one tilts. I'm ready, sir.
This side tilts instantly and effortlessly as it corners, keeping my drinks firmly in place.
That is astonishing!
Ben Hur was clearly onto something, though I'm pretty sure he never foresaw its impact on refreshment systems.
Science works! Who'd have thought?
So, the more they lean, the less the force pushing outwards on sidecars, chariots, and trains. To make trains lean, are banked, inclined into the bend. And that worked well for older, slower trains. But bullet trains are so fast, they need to lean even further into bends. Bullet train engineers didn't need to wait for reports from uncomfortable passengers to know that banking alone is... Every part of the bullet train experience is minutely tested, including cornering at high speed. Is the test train.
Right, this is odd. This is a simulator. Obviously, it's not as long as a real train, but here we go. Chaps, no passengers. There.
Let's see what happens. This simulator can replicate the sensations of the bullet travelling at any speed on any kind of track. Today's experiment, cornering at nearly 300 kilometres an hour. Right now, in a straight line, and I'll admit I'm completely convinced, as far as I'm concerned, I'm in a high-speed train. And as we go into the bend, this has been set up to simulate just a bad track. Starting to, yeah, I can, oh, yes, straight away. Yeah, I can feel that throwing me off to the right. So banking isn't enough. And you can't bank the track any more than this, because if you do, well, if a train has to stop at it one day, it might fall over. Which is where Ben-Hur comes to the rescue. Computer-controlled airbags under each carriage make the entire bullet train lean. As it corners, each section of the N700, the latest bullet train, tilts independently at just the right time and by just the right amount. On a real bullet train, the effect is quite noticeable. Or, in fact, it isn't. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? Because now, judging by the blur through the windows, we're doing the kind of speeds that present a bit of a problem for my tea if there's controlled tilting taking place. In fact, I'm so confident I'm going topless. This would be potentially dangerous without a very clever train. And look at that, I mean, it's not going anywhere. No, was it tea or a coffee, man? Nah, it was coffee, I'm sure of it. Thanks to ancient charioteers, bullet corner 20 kilometres an hour faster, keeping travellers right on time. So, bullet trains stay on track, along straights and around bends, as long as the track itself stays in place. But you can't bank on that here. All trains face a big problem. Earthquakes. This is one of the most earthquake-prone lands on the planet. And the problem could be much worse at higher speeds, because trains and passengers could potentially suffer much greater impacts. Keeping their high-speed trains to stay on track through an earthquake would be a particular challenge for the engineers. Japan is struck by around 900 quakes a year. In 1995, the shock destroyed the city of Kobe, killing more than 6,000 people. And every 100 years or so, Tokyo has been shaken by an even more devastating quake. And now they're braced for the next one, which on past form could happen any time. Of course, the thing that really worries railway engineers is the same earthquakes that topple tall and rip up roads can derail trains. So it's good to know that thanks to the electric telegraph, there is a system in place to protect passengers on the bullet train. And now I'm going to just read my earthquake instructions again, just to be sure. Seek shelter under a table. It's glass. No table's going to protect you if the train you're on is derailed at nearly 300 kilometers an hour. Engineers needed advance warning of earthquakes to slow the trains. So they designed the world's first earthquake warning system. The idea was to alert engineers before a quake arrived. But in actual practice, this proves to be a problem. An earthquake warning system is really only as good as the tremor detectors or seismometers. To understand the problem, we need an earthquake. And back in England, you can wait all day for long. But according to earthquake expert Hugh Hunt, a lake and a large weight will replicate the key components of a seismic shock.
and a precarious tower of blocks will play the part of its potential victim.
Right, Hugh, we've assembled everything you asked for. We're in a boat on a small lake, and over there is a digger with a big weight in it. How's this an earthquake?
Well, simulate an earthquake by dropping this lump of metal into the water, and it's going to create a wave. And in an earthquake, you've got waves in the ground.
Hugh has set up a system to warn me of the quake before it strikes, so I can try to protect the tower. It all depends on this.
That thing there is a seismometer. Motion.
Hugh's seismometer should detect the quake and trigger a warning on his laptop.
So we have an earthquake detection system down there attached to my tower.
Yeah.
So it's going to know when there's an earthquake.
I'm going to use my earthquake detection system to tell you when you have to take action to protect the tower, right? So
this is my earthquake.
That's the earthquake protection system. Richard, ready for an earthquake?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Right, so I'm going to ignore the sound of a large weight dropping into the water 20 metres away from me. I won't move until Hugh's warning system detects the quake.
OK, earthquake, go!
Any sign of an earthquake?
Yeah, there's something coming.
Right. Yeah. Do you see, the thing is...
You're too slow.
Well, my point. All you did was say there's an earthquake happening.
Too slow.
But there was an earthquake, then it fell
Look,
over.
it went red here, OK?
But I was with my protection system,
red.
I never used
It means earthquake, Richard, and you were just too slow.
Yeah, clearly what we have there, then, is a problem.
Hugh's system only detects an earthquake when it's a... Not much advance warning, not much good. Luckily for bullet train protection, earthquakes aren't quite as sneaky as this. They actually announce their arrival with small, fast-moving waves.
And what they discovered back in, 100 and something years ago was that there's two primary wave, which they called the P wave, and the secondary wave, which they called the S wave.
The slower S wave are the destructive ones that topple cities and floating towers. They're what Hugh's seismometer detected, but too late to be a useful warning. The key to advance warning is to detect the faster P waves. But unfortunately, waves are much smaller than S waves. You need a more sensitive seismometer. And for them, electromagnets, first used in the electric telegraph way back in 1837.
This is a working model of a device that quite probably represents the very first use of electricity for, well, anything. And it's actually a machine used to communicate between railway stations. Central to it is electromagnetism.
Behind the metal needles are coils of wire. Passing a current through a coil turns it into an electromagnet, which moves the needle. Reversing the current moves the needle in the opposite direction.
If I pass a current through the coil, the needle moves. If I switch it and pass the current the other way, the polarity switches, the needle moves the other way. All I needed then was a map of letters, and you can point to them if I want to spell an H, or an I, or a K. If I want to do an E, point to both needles. Hasn't got all the letters, there are only 20 on here, so it's an early way of texting.
150 years later, the electric telegraph has made way for mobiles and the internet, but electromagnets are still very useful.
This isn't a telegraph machine, but obviously it's a crane, quite a big one. But the important bit is at the business end there, because it's an electromagnet. And there it goes doing its thing. Basically, this is just a magnet that can be on, or at the touch of a button, off. Suddenly it's no longer magnet. But it isn't always that simple, because it can be a question of degree. It can be powerful or less powerful.
You can vary this crane's lifting power. Small current, weak magnet, less. Up the current and you can shift large lumps of metal. But that's not all. You can measure changes in electromagnetism very accurately, and knowing how much force is being used is the key to protecting the bullet train, and I hope my tower, from earthquakes. Back on the lake, I'm going to update my earthquake warning system. Sensor expert Sean Gosen is coming aboard with a sophisticated electromagnetic seismometer.
So, Sean, you came aboard bringing with you your posher piece of kit. What essentially is the difference between... This is the real deal, isn't it?
Yes, it's much more sensitive.
Sean's seismometer uses electromagnets to detect tiny moves such as the pulses of P waves.
So will you be able to detect these finer P waves that you singularly failed to do? Well,
thanks, Richard.
Well, your earthquake warning system consisted of saying there's an earthquake and everything's fallen over.
Sean's seismometer is so sensitive it needs to be placed on the stable lake bed.
OK, well, if everybody's in the right place, shall we give this a go? I promise not to look. I'll just wait until I get a warning from Sean.
We're both monitoring our system.
Yeah.
Are we ready for an earthquake? Go!
I've deployed my system. That is an early warning. Look at that. Oh.
Richard, here comes an earthquake.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. We know there's an earthquake because everything's moving, but it's OK. I think earthquake protection net has saved the day, and it was only able to do so because you could actually warn me there was an earthquake coming this time, rather than you could tell me there is one. And it's that difference, that it's just the fact that your system can detect those finer, smaller, different frequency waves.
Sean's system alerted me about 7 seconds before the quake arrived, an actual advance warning. And seismometers using electromagnets are sensitive enough to protect the bullet train. The current system is the most sophisticated earthquake warning system in the world. About 70 linked seismometers are and nearby map seismic activity. 2 seconds after detecting P waves, power is switched off and any train in the danger zone automatically brakes. For vehicles with a stopping distance of just over 3 kilometers, every second counts. In a 2004 quake, the system in place successfully stopped 4 bullet trains. But a 5th was too close to the epicenter and became the only bullet train ever to be derailed. In a constant quest for perfection, engineers have since developed a cutting-edge anti-derailment system. This is the Bullet Train Research Center. They don't let just anybody see their pioneering kit, and I'm shadowed at all times.
Ah, hello.
おはようございます。村松と申します。
Yes, hello.
今日よろしくお願いします。
Very nice to see you.
どうぞ。
Ah, right, sit down.
はい。
Okay, this is where I'm out all about the
じゃ
place.
あ。
The engineers were keen to share the complicated earthquake science behind the system, but it's all Greek, well, Japanese to me.
クラスでもう一度揺らしてみます。映像を次にご覧いただきます。
Yeah, I should have brought a phrase book. Fortunately, the lesson has a practical demonstration for underachieving students like.
It's one of those simple but effective solutions. They've fitted an extra rail. So in the event of a train too close to the epicenter of an earthquake, for the P-wave system to detect it and warn the driver in time to slow it down, this is here to keep everything on track.
Even when the ground moves violently, the wheels are held in place by the extra rails. As with every part of the bullet train, exhaustively tested.
To find out if their idea worked, the engineers built themselves, well, it's a model train set. Admittedly, the track
doesn't go very far, but then it is built for a very specific purpose. This is a 1/5 scale replica of the real thing. And it's a feature that probably most model railway enthusiasts don't have on their set at home, an earthquake simulator. The lip of the wheel sits between the two rails, so even the really violent tremors can't train off track. The special rails are currently being introduced along sections of the line. It really is an astonishing train. Fast. Always on time. And beautiful too. Bullet train engineers have moved technology pioneered in Britain 200 years ago into the 21st century.
Now, bullet train technology is being exported all over the world, even back to Britain. The bullet train really has led the way to a new global age of the train. China and America are committing to high-speed rail networks. And this revolutionary train wouldn't have been possible without
ancient chariot racing.
Oh, my God!
A crowbar. A medieval clock.
God, that really is moving. The stopping's going to be uncomfortable, obviously.
A 19th century luxury car.
My wheels on my train just can't get enough grip to get me moving.
And the electric telegraph.
Any sign of an earthquake?
Yes, something coming there.
This is one of the strangest places on Earth. It's the inside of a vast, sophisticated machine, which is driven by an ancient technology. It's a tanker with a cargo that can power London for about a week. A cargo equivalent to the energy of 55 nuclear bombs.
This huge ship is carrying liquefied natural gas, millions of litres of this stuff. At room temperature, it turns into a highly flammable gas. That's why people...
The liquid inside these tankers becomes gas for cooking and heat at home.
Creating the technology to transport it is very complex. Yet these ships owe their existence surprising connections.
Kitchen cutlery. The father of each.
And there it goes.
The world's first steam engine. World War engines. And air-to-air refueling. Transporting natural gas around the is a big business. This supertanker is larger than the Titanic and is designed to carry natural gas all over the globe.
She's a big ship, yeah, so you know everything about her is going to be super scale, but it's only when you get close up you realise how big.
Admittedly, I'm not the tallest chap you'll meet. It would make even him feel small. The propeller alone is more than 5 times my height and weighs 48 tons. The whole ship is nearly 300 meters long. The half football pitches. And it takes a lot of looking after.
Comes into dry dock like this, she's repainted. She is quite big,
so it is quite a lot of paint. Tons of it gets applied. I didn't come here simply to feel small. I can do that anywhere. I came here because I want to see how these ships shift huge quantities of gas all around the globe. They have vast tanks, but getting inside them is very tricky. The ships have to be in dry dock, and the tanks have to be completely purged of any trace of their hazardous cargo. This is the inside of one of the tanks, and as far as we know, nobody's ever actually filmed inside one of these before. That seems a shame, because look at it. All you need is one light, one camera. You can make a sci-fi movie and listen to it. That echo is real, analog, not a digital effect. Real sounds bouncing around this cavernous tank. There's room for 34 million litres of liquid gas in here. The equivalent volume of water would allow the average British home to flush the toilet for 1,200 years. And there are 4 of these, each at minus 100 degrees inside. Just another world. It's just crazy. Just like oil, natural gas is a fossil fuel found in ancient organisms decomposed. It can be shifted in pipelines, but expensive and impractical for crossing oceans. Instead, engineers had to work out how to transport it by ship. That's a challenge when you remember that natural gas ignites at any air temperature found on Earth. To learn how you transport gas safely, I went to a research facility in northern England. This is a blast-proof chamber, a sort of industrial-scale oven. Right, well, this device here is a supply of gas up through this tube. This is an igniter, it'll create a spark, light the gas, and it'll burn. It's quite a lot of gas, a lot more than you're used to at home, but don't worry, this place we're in can take it. This is a specialised blast testing facility. They use it to test industrial safety equipment on a massive scale, so it'll be okay. Nevertheless, I think I'll get out while we light it. Since someone had left the oven door off, we retreat to a safe distance. Cue the spark.
Four, 3, 2, 1, release gas.
That's just a few litres of gas. Imagine a cargo of many millions of litres. To be ignited by the tiniest of sparks. That cargo has the energy equivalent of 55 atomic bombs. Spilling it could be a massive disaster. But there has never been any major accident, and the operators plan to keep it that way. Fortunately, there's a simple solution. Turn the gas into a liquid. As a liquid, it can't catch fire. And what's more, it takes up much less space. If the cargo were in gas form, the tanker would need to be impossibly big. It would have to be 600 times more voluminous, which would make it 10 longer than this ship. 2,500 metres, 1.5 miles. To the gas liquid, you chill it to minus 162 degrees Celsius. That's nearly twice as cold as it ever gets in Antarctica. But it only has to warm a little bit to turn back into highly flammable gas. so the crew are ultra cautious with their volatile cargo. As I found out when I went on board a fully laden tanker.
As a liquid, it won't explode, nor will it burn. But the operators of LNG carriers can't take any chances with safety. So to avoid even the remotest risk of igniting any gas vapor, electronic devices are not allowed anywhere near those tanks. If I want to go forward from here, the stern, I can't even wear a microphone. So, it's got to go. There you go.
Neither can I take my telephone, my camera, and certainly not a TV crew beyond the bridge. They take no chances with this precious cargo. If you could hear me, I'd be saying that under my feet is a tank exactly the same as the one I climbed inside earlier. It's one of 4 full of ultra-cold liquid. That's an awful lot of natural gas on these ships. Keeping it as super cold liquid is the first and best line of defense. But what if any of the cargo warmed up and turned back into gas? The consequences would be dire. So there is a second line of defense.
With the cargo is the other side of these walls. Tens of millions of litres. And remember, that's in liquid form. Expand it into gas, ready to use, and it's billions of litres. And if any of the liquid made its way and leaked out and turned back into vapour, well, that could be a big problem. But it doesn't, thanks to a pre-war mail plane.
In the 1930s, flying boats delivered mail and passengers from Britain to Australia in 700-mile hops. They couldn't cross the Atlantic until they were able to take on fuel during flight. Nowadays, we take mid-air refueling for granted. But aviation fuel, just like natural gas, is flammable. A single spark when the refueling pipe makes contact and, well, it's kaboom.
What aviators needed was something to stop an explosion if there was a spark. What they needed, in fact, was noxious air. That's the name Daniel Rutherford gave nitrogen when he first isolated it in 1772. There might be lots of nitrogen around in the atmosphere, and there is a lot, but in its pure state, we can't breathe. Sadly, it took a dead mouse in the container of the stuff to make that particular scientific advance. But the point here is not an inert gas. It doesn't react readily with anything at all. And more importantly, it stops fuel combining with oxygen if there's a spark. Ignition is impossible if there's enough nitrogen around. Fires can't breathe nitrogen either. And that's a claim that just needs to be put to the test.
Time to fire up the industrial oven once again. This time with nitrogen inside it. First, it's sealed to contain the toxic gas safely. Nitrogen on. I get to watch from inside a special canopy to the side. A meter shows how the oxygen level drops as nitrogen replaces the normal air around the igniter. Remember, the theory is that gas won't burn unless there's enough oxygen present. 10 means there's hardly any oxygen in the chamber. It's now mostly nitrogen.
I know the science, I know this should work, but suddenly I'm strangely nervous. Maybe it's just the drama of the surroundings.
Right, if we're ready to do this, let's kill the nitrogen supply. OK, let's have the spark on then, please. The igniter, no gas in there yet, remember. So very soon we'll see the sparks at the top of the funnel. Let's have a look. There they go, that's the spark. Smoke on them, please. Now, the smoke is purely an indicator here, because otherwise we won't be able to see when the gas starts flowing. Right now, no gas going and you can see the smoke. As soon as the gas starts, it'll pull the smoke up through that funnel.
The chamber is full of nitrogen. The spark is firing.
We can have on then. And at that point, the only thing stopping ignition has to be the nitrogen. There you go. Look at it, you can see where the smoke's coming out the top. That's been pulled through by the gas. That's the same gas we saw burning earlier, and yet with there, look at that. Nothing. Do you know what? I find that strangely comforting. Science tells you it should work. There it is working. Look at that. Gas charging in now. The nitrogen quashing it. It can't ignite. It can't.
Nitrogen also protects gas tankers and mid-air refueling. A quick squirt of nitrogen down refueling pipes removes any risk of explosion. Thanks to nitrogen, an Empire flying boat made its first transatlantic flight back in 1938. On gas tankers, the potentially poisonous nitrogen is safely sealed inside the gas tank insulation. This thin layer of aluminium, almost foil, is the outermost skin. But obviously, if I were to poke my finger through it, it wouldn't go straight into a tank full of tens of millions of litres of liquefied natural gas. On the other side of the aluminium, there's a layer of insulation, critically to keep the temperature low. Then there's the aluminium tank itself. But that layer of insulation isn't just about temperature. It's porous, and it's been steeped in nitrogen. So if there is a problem in the tank, nothing can burn. There's no... It's inert. In case of a leak, nitrogen stops the volatile cargo reacting with oxygen, and the insulation keeps it in liquid form.
They're the world's biggest deep freezers, the equivalent of more than 300,000 domestic freezers like the one at home, and 10 times colder inside.
The gas is chilled on shore, and the liquid is then put onto the tanker. But these super cold temperatures pose big engineering challenges. You can't just use standard steel pipes to do the job.
Moving the ultra-cold liquid around the place, off the ship and around the ship on pipes like these, presented a whole new set of problems that could only be resolved by recourse to the engineering might of this, and of this, and even of this. But no, not actual cutlery, obviously. That'd take hours. No, what it's made of.
Stainless steel. 100 years ago, cutlery was made of metals, silver, say, or plain steel for everyday tableware. But steel rust putting at dinner, and like many materials, it changes completely when you put it in the deep, deep freeze.
Subantarctic temperatures are a game changer. Suddenly, strong things that you thought you could rely on, like, behave differently when you put them in the deep, deep freeze. It's all about ductile to brittle transition temperatures. The properties of things change with temperature. An example, bread. At room temperature, a slice of bread is bendy, ductile in the jargon. Take the same piece, freeze it, it's harder, but brittle. Wouldn't it be terrible if steel behaved the same way? It does.
Jackie Butterfield, a materials specialist and steel consultant, introduced to a medieval torture device.
This is the sort of equipment that we'd use to test the toughness of a metal.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. What'll I do?
First thing you can do is lift this weight up and we'll lock it in position.
Right, thank you. OK, I always get the nice... Right, so just swing this back, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, it's got a lot of weight.
Just for the record, I'm not being a complete weakling. Quite heavy. About 10 kilograms.
So it's a fitness programme?
It is, absolutely.
Okay. Right, so that's... The weight is primed.
Yeah, so what this is going to do, this weight has potential energy.
So that's a measured dose of energy applied to the sample down there.
Absolutely.
It's the same each time because the weight is the same.
Step forward, victim number 1. A length of standard steel tube, just like a scaffold.
Triggering test. So this is going to return a specific amount of potential energy transferred into kinetic that will be absorbed or not by the sample. OK, here we go. 3, 2, 1. It's not even dented it.
Despite the force of the weight slamming into it, at air temperature, the bog standard carbon steel remained undamaged, whilst the energy stayed through the frame around it.
So this sample has survived then?
Absolutely.
What are we doing here?
What we need to do now is test some of the carbon steel at the cryogenic temperatures with the liquid nitrogen.
So this is where we introduce our tricky subantarctic temperatures.
Absolutely.
Cue liquid nitrogen, minus 195 degrees Celsius. This will give the steel the same kind of thermal shock as the chilled liquid natural gas to the tanker.
Thank you, mysterious man with a large, large vat of liquid nitrogen. He just follows me around. I've got to be really careful here. Goggles. Put it in.
Yep.
So, the liquid nitrogen is going to be removing the heat from the steel. For how long do we have to leave that?
Just for about 10 seconds, it should get down to the right temperature.
In 10 seconds?
Yeah.
That liquid nitrogen will have removed that energy from the steel?
Yes, it
that
will.
Quickly? No wonder you have to be careful not to spill it on yourself. Right, okay.
So, the liquid nitrogen has dramatically lowered the temperature of the steel, just as the gas cargo would do as it's pulled the ship.
Right, if we're ready, 3, 2, 1. It's broken. Badly. Look at that. It's just shattered. So it's exactly the same sample, same metal. This one barely a scratch. This one ruined. Just shattered. Behaved completely differently.
In a brittle manner.
Brittle, ductile.
Ductile.
Brittle, ductile.
Clearly then, you wouldn't want to rely on that anywhere really cold. In a liquid gas tanker, for instance. Instead, the tanker engineers needed a material that can withstand super cold temperatures. Brings us back to cutlery of the stainless steel variety. In 1913, British chemist Harry Brearley was looking for a tough metal for gun barrels. He mixed chromium and steel, but it was too soft. However, the reject alloy revealed unexpected benefits. It didn't rust, which was good for cutlery, and even better for liquid gas tankers. Putting this new stainless steel in the deep freeze doesn't make it brittle.
This is stainless steel. Not only is it very corrosion resistant, it's very, very tough at low temperatures.
OK, well, we now have our system here so we can test this.
Yeah.
Do the same test, same potential energy, kinetic energy in, see what happens. So, loading it in. Ooh, that's slightly sort of frightening when you do that. Here is frozen sample. 3, 2, 1. That's completely... It's just shrugged it off. So what's actually happened so different? Why is this fine and that's ruined?
Because of the alloying elements in the stainless steel, it's changed the crystal structure, the way the atoms are arranged in the metal.
So the difference between these two samples is right down at the atomic level.
It is, yes.
And that's where its ability to absorb the energy or be ruined by it stems from, right down at that level.
Simply adding some chromium can make ordinary brittle steel stand up to cryogenic temperatures.
The engineers who built the LNG carriers ensured that not only were the holes fit for the 7 seas, but that the thousands of metres of intricate pipework, with all their vulnerable bends, joints and tapes, were made of a material that could take it when the going gets cold.
But transporting liquid by ship brings another challenge: stopping it from sloshing. And engineers have 2 liquids to worry about on these tankers. On the way out, they have a cargo of liquid gas, and on the return journey, when it's empty, they carry water as ballast to stabilize. The same problem in 2 different forms.
If a liquid cargo starts to on a ship, it can be a real problem. Basically, when wind or waves rock the ship itself, that can send the liquid from side to side in the tanks. That motion can build, emphasising the rocking of the ship itself, and, well, it can be disastrous.
It's called the free surface effect. I set out to discover just how bad it can be. And yeah, given my driving record, I am, well, perhaps more than a little nervous. Only a bit.
Right, what I have here is a van, perfectly ordinary, apart from the massive tank fitted into the back, containing water, a lot of it. Water that's free to slosh about. So what I'm looking to experience is, for myself, firsthand, the free surface effect.
The free surface is literally the area available for a liquid to slosh around freely. And just in case it does affect the van, I'm securely harnessed inside a roll cage. First, I took it slowly, to ensure just a little bit of sloshing.
As I turn into the corner, obviously the water wants to stay where it is off to the right. Ooh, just, yes, it is sort of affecting the way it feels. This way, and then this way, it doesn't feel. Ooh, yeah, it's sloshing. I can feel it jerk the vehicle in a direction other than the one in which I want it to go. I don't know whether it's me driving or the tank of water. That's a strange feeling.
Time to step on it and ship and its liquid cargo rolling through stormy seas. Well, step on it as much as I can.
A lot of water going around. It's very unpleasant. Yeah, that didn't go as well as it might have done.